Have you ever seen someone so beaten down by life they stop expecting anything good to happen? That was Mara Ellison, standing on an auction block in the middle of Montana. No family, no money, and a nasty scar on her face. At 26, she was considered old goods. Men looked right through her. But one man, Jonah Reed, saw the fight she was hiding, and he made a choice that was going to change everything for both of them. This story is about how a single act of decency can save a soul. If you believe that, stick around and tell me what city you are watching from. Jonah was a quiet man, weathered by 32 years of solitude. He only came to the dusty town of Ember Hollow for supplies, planning to be gone before the sun got high. But that day, the trading post was closed for a bride auction. Jonah had seen these things before. Women brought in from back east, sold off to settlers like they were livestock. He had no use for a wife, and even less for a crowd, but he had time to kill. He watched from the back as a weaselly man named Hooper paraded the women out. One by one, they were claimed and led away. Then only Mara was left. Hooper's smile soured. He announced her name, her age, and the fact that she came with nothing. The woman who stepped forward wasn't a classic beauty. Her face was all sharp angles, and a pale scar ran from her temple to her jaw. She stood there, straight and still, while the men in the crowd shifted and muttered. Hooper tried his best. He said she was a hard worker with a strong back. The silence that followed was heavy and mean. One fella finally spat on the ground and said he would have to be paid to take her. The crowd let out a nasty laugh. Mara flinched, just a little, but Jonah saw it. And something inside him just broke. Before he knew what he was doing, his voice cut through the noise. "I will take her." The laughter choked and died. Every single head turned to look at the quiet man in the back. Mara's head whipped around, her eyes wide with a shock that broke right through her careful, blank expression. The auctioneer, Hooper, looked stunned. He stammered, "You will what?" Jonah said it again, louder this time, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I will take her." Hooper, seeing a sale was a sale, snapped his smile back on. "Excellent. Mr. Reed, she is yours. The contract will be ready by tonight." The disappointed crowd started to wander off. Jonah walked right through them until he stood a few feet from Mara. The two of them just stood there for a long moment, the Montana wind blowing dust around their boots. Finally, she found her voice. It was low and a little rough. "Why?" Jonah did not have a fancy answer, so he gave her the only one he had. "I do not know." Her dark eyes searched his face, looking for a trick or a joke. When she did not find one, she said quietly, "I am not what you think I am." Jonah just shook his head. "I do not think anything. I do not even know you." A bitter look crossed her face. "Exactly. So why would you choose me?" Jonah looked over her head at the last of the smirking men as they left. "Because nobody else did." The words were simple and honest, and in that moment, for the first time that day, the trembling in Mara Ellison's hands finally stopped. Ever see something so wrong you just had to act? This is a story about a man who did, and about the woman nobody wanted. It goes to show you that what is on the outside is not the whole story. So listen close. You might just see folks a little differently after this. Hooper, the man running the show, said, "I will grant you that, but she is healthy, works hard, and will not cost you a thing." A fella near the front spit on the ground. "You would have to pay me to take that one." A wave of laughter went through the crowd. Mara barely flinched, but Jonah saw it. Something inside him just snapped. He did not think. He did not plan. The words just came out of his mouth. "I will take her." The laughing stopped cold. Every head turned his way. Hooper blinked, confused. "You will what?" Jonah said it again, louder this time, his voice firm. "I will take her." The crowd started whispering. Men stared at him like he had gone plumb crazy. And Mara, she was looking at him with pure shock on her face, and something else underneath that she hid right away. Hooper finally found his voice, a smile plastered on his face. "Well now, wonderful. Jonah Reed, is it not? Did not know you were looking for a wife." "I was not," Jonah said, "but I said I will take her. Let us get this over with." "Of course," Hooper said quickly. "Miss Ellison, you will go with Mr. Reed. We will have the papers drawn up tonight, just a formality. Congratulations." The crowd was already breaking up, their fun spoiled. Jonah pushed through the last few people and stopped in front of Mara, not knowing what to say. He had no idea what he had just done. She looked up at him. For a long moment it was quiet between them. Finally she asked, "Why?" Her voice was low and scratchy, like she did not use it much. Jonah did not have a good answer, so he just told the truth. "I do not know." She looked him over, searching his face for a trick or for pity. When she did not see any, her face softened just a little. "I am not what you think," she said quietly. "I do not think anything," Jonah answered. "I do not know you." Her mouth twisted. "Exactly. You do not know me. So why pick me?" "Because no one else was going to." The words came out plain and honest. It was all he had. Mara caught her breath, and for a second he thought she might break down, but she did not. She just gave a single, sharp nod. "All right, then. I will go with you." She looked past him at the mountains in the distance. "Anything is better than this place." Jonah thought about telling her not to be so sure. His cabin was a long way from anywhere. His life was tough. He had no idea how to live with someone else. But he kept his mouth shut. He just pointed toward his horse. "I need to get some supplies. We will leave in an hour." She nodded and walked off toward a small building at the edge of the town. Jonah watched her go, her back held straight, and felt a heavy feeling settle in his gut. What in the world had he just done? An hour later they were heading north. Jonah had his supplies, and Mara had a single canvas bag over her shoulder. It looked like everything she owned. No one came to see her off. Jonah offered her the horse, but she shook her head. "I can walk." "It is 15 miles, he said. "I have walked farther." He did not argue with her. He just walked beside her, leading the horse as they went off into the wild. Two strangers tied together by a choice neither one of them understood. They did not talk for the first few miles. The land around them was huge and empty under a big blue sky. Jonah was comfortable with silence, but Mara's silence felt heavier, like it was full of unspoken things. He finally broke it. "You do not have to be scared of me." She gave him a surprised look. "I am not." "Most folks are." "Why?" she asked. "Because I do not talk much, and I live alone way out here." Mara thought about that for a minute. "I do not talk much either, and I have been alone most of my life, so I guess that makes us even." Jonah almost cracked a smile at that. After a while he asked, "Where are you from?" "Pennsylvania, a long time ago," she said, choosing her words with care. "My parents died of a fever. I got passed around to different family until they did not want me anymore. Then I headed west." "Looking for what?" Jonah asked. "Nothing," she said flatly. "Just away." Jonah understood that feeling all too well. "What about you?" Mara asked him. "Born in Missouri. My parents had a farm, but it went under. My daddy drank himself into the grave. My mother died a year after." His voice was flat, just stating facts. "I have been on my own since I was 17. 15 years, Mara said softly. "That is a long time to be by yourself." "It is safer," he said. "Safer than what?" "Than caring about people." Mara looked at him, and her expression changed. "You are right," she said. "It is." They walked in silence until they reached a creek. While the horse drank, Mara knelt and scooped water with her hands. Jonah noticed again how she just took care of herself, never asking for help. Maybe that was why he had picked her. Or maybe he was just a fool. "Your face," he said, and then felt stupid. "The scar. You do not have to talk about it." "A house fire," Mara said, cutting him off. She kept her eyes on the water. I was 12. It was my uncle's house. I tried to get my cousin out. A beam fell. She did not make it, I did. Her hand went to her cheek, tracing the scar. Everyone always said the wrong one lived. Jonah's chest felt tight. That is not true, is it? She finally looked right at him, her eyes as hard as stone. She was 7, pretty. Everyone loved her. I was just there. After the fire, looking at me just reminded them. So they sent me away. Jonah had no words for that kind of pain. All he could do was meet her gaze and hold it, steady and honest, until she was the one who looked away. "Come on," he said gently. "Let us keep going." They got to his cabin just as the sun was setting. It was not much to look at, just a one-room log cabin with a stone chimney. But the roof looked solid, and the door hung straight. A small corral for the horse stood nearby. "It is not much," Jonah said, feeling a little ashamed of it. Mara walked right past him, set her bag down, and looked all around. Then she turned to him. "It is more than I had this morning." A little bit of the weight lifted off Jonah's shoulders. "All right then," he said. "Let us get you settled." That night they ate jerky and biscuits without saying much. Jonah gave her the only bed and made a spot for himself on the floor by the fire. She tried to refuse, but he just waved her off. "I am used to it." As the fire died down, Jonah lay there listening to her breathe across the small room. He still had no earthly idea why he had done what he did. But as he fell asleep, one thing was perfectly clear. He was not alone anymore. And for the first time in 15 years, he was not sure how he felt about that. The next morning was cold and gray. Jonah woke up and saw Mara was already awake. She was kneeling by the fireplace, gently bringing the coals back to life. She moved with a quiet purpose, like someone who knew how to stay out of the way. He sat up. She looked over her shoulder at him. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yeah, thanks," he said. She just nodded and hung the pot over the fire. Have you ever been stuck with a stranger, two lost souls pushed together by a fate that was not kind? That was Jonah and Mara, two people who learned that sometimes getting a second chance just means surviving the next winter. Jonah pulled his boots on, and that cold outside air hit him hard. A norther was blowing in. He could feel the coming winter in his bones. Back inside, Mara had coffee ready in 2 tin cups. She passed one to him, and their hands brushed. She flinched away like she had touched a hot skillet. They drank without saying a word. Finally, Jonah spoke. "I am fixing the corral fence today before this weather rolls in." She just nodded. "What do you need me to do?" He paused for a moment. Having another person around was new territory. "The root cellar out back needs clearing out," he said, "and see if anything is left in the garden." "All right," she said. She put her cup down, tied back her hair, and walked right out the door. She did not ask a single question or offer one complaint. Jonah watched her leave and felt a grudging respect. He spent the day wrestling with rotted posts and sharp wire. Mara worked just as hard, clearing out the cellar and pulling what was left from the garden. She had a quiet grit about her, the kind you get when you learn that your own 2 hands are what keep you alive. Around noon, the wind began to bite and the first snowflakes drifted down. Jonah headed inside. Mara came in soon after, her hands chapped raw and red from the work and the cold. "Here," Jonah said, grabbing a tin of salve off a shelf. "For your hands." She looked at it like she had never seen one before. "I am fine." "You are bleeding," he pointed out. She glanced at her knuckles, cracked and bleeding, but just shrugged. "It is nothing." "Take it," he insisted. For a second he thought she might say no, but then she slowly took the tin from him. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He just nodded and went to stir the stew on the fire. He heard the lid of the tin scrape open behind him. The silence during dinner felt different this time, not bad, just new and unfamiliar. Jonah broke it by talking about work. The snow is starting to stick. We need more firewood. Mara nodded. I will help. You do not have to. I said I will help. Her voice was firm, and he understood completely. She was not looking for a handout, and he respected that. All right, he said. Tomorrow. Later that night, with him by the fire and her in the bed, she spoke from the shadows. Why do you live way out here? He took his time answering, trying to explain 15 years of being alone. It is quiet, he finally said, and nobody asks anything of me. Is that what you really want? To be left alone? It is what I am used to. That is not the same thing, she said. He could hear the truth in her voice, even in the darkness. What about you? He asked. What is it you want? The silence stretched on for a long time. He thought she was not going to answer. Then she spoke softly. I do not know. I have spent my whole life just trying to get by. I never had time to think about what I wanted. Jonah poked the fire, watching the embers fly up the chimney. He understood that feeling better than anything. Well, maybe that is something we can figure out together, he said. The days that followed fell into a pattern. They learned to work side by side, finding a quiet rhythm. He would chop the wood and she would stack it. He would fix the roof and she would patch the walls. They did not need to talk much. They began to understand each other through small, unspoken gestures. She would have a tool ready for him before he even asked. He would leave hot water on the fire for when she came inside from the cold. One afternoon, Jonah returned from his trap lines and stopped dead in his tracks. The cabin was clean. The years of clutter he had lived with were gone. Mara was at the hearth, stirring a pot that smelled absolutely wonderful. What is all this? He asked, looking around. I found some herbs and vegetables, she said. I thought we could eat something besides stew for a change. He set down the 2 rabbits he had caught and looked in the pot. The soup was thick and smelled amazing. Smells good, he said. It is just soup. Still, he said. For just a second, he saw a flicker of pleasure on her face before it disappeared. As they ate, he found himself watching her across the small table. The firelight softened her face, and he saw a strength there that was more than just beautiful. You are staring, she said, her eyes still on her bowl. Sorry. Why are you sorry? Just seemed like the right thing to say. The corner of her mouth turned up. It was almost a smile. You are a strange man, Jonah Reed. I have been told that before. I do not mean it in a bad way. I know. She looked right at him then, and he felt a wall between them start to crumble. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. Do you regret it, choosing me? Jonah thought for a moment. He had wondered himself sometimes, but the answer was simple. No, he said, I do not. Why not? You are a hard worker. You do not complain, and your soup is better than mine. She let out a short, startled laugh, like the sound surprised even her. It was the first time Jonah had ever heard her laugh, and the sound did something warm to his chest. That is not saying much, she said, but she was smiling a real smile now. You are not what I expected either. What did you expect? He asked. Someone mean, maybe, or someone who would just pretend I was not here. But you are not like that. I am just trying to figure all this out, Jonah admitted. Same as you. Yeah, she said, looking down at her own 2 hands, as if seeing them for the first time. I guess we both are. Winter hit them hard 2 weeks later. Snow piled up, trapping them in the small cabin. The world outside disappeared, but being closed in together was not a prison. It was the beginning of them finding a real life, not just surviving one. They were 2 outcasts finding their own way home, proving that even in the harshest winter, something new and good could still grow. Have you ever felt like you were just thrown away by the world? That is the story of Jonah and Mara, two souls tossed aside who wound up sharing a cabin in the middle of a fierce Texas winter. They were proof that the best things are sometimes built from pieces other folks discard. Out there, with a blizzard howling outside, there were no judging eyes, just the two of them and the work. One evening, Mara was mending one of Jonah's shirts by the fire. He was carving a new handle for an axe. The scrape of his knife on the wood was the only sound besides the wind. "Tell me about the farm," Mara said, breaking the quiet. Jonah stopped, a little surprised. They had shared facts, but never the stories behind them. "It was small," he finally said. "My daddy worked himself into an early grave on that stubborn piece of dirt. After a few bad seasons, he just gave up." "And your mother?" she asked. "When he started drinking, something inside her just broke. She was gone within a year of his passing." Mara's hands went still. "That must have been hard being on your own so young." "It was what it was," Jonah said. "I learned real quick the only person I could count on was myself." "Is that why you came out here?" Mara asked. "So you would never have to count on anyone again?" Jonah looked at her, amazed she understood so well. "Yeah, I reckon it is." Mara nodded. "I get that. After my cousin passed, I was bounced from one relative to the next, always temporary. I would just start to feel settled, and then I would be in the way again. Eventually, I just stopped trying. It was easier not to care." "But you still came west," Jonah pointed out. "That took some grit." Her smile was tired. "I think I was just weary of being someone's problem. Out here, if I fail, at least it is on my own terms." "You are not failing," he said, his voice firm. "You are still here. You are still working. That is more than most folks can say." Jonah put down the axe handle and met her gaze. He saw the glint of tears in her eyes before she quickly looked away and picked up the shirt again. "Thank you," she whispered. Jonah just nodded and went back to his carving, but the quiet between them felt different now. As the weeks turned, things began to change. The heavy silence that had filled the cabin in the early days began to lighten. It was replaced by something fragile, something like trust. Mara started to talk more, sharing little bits and pieces of her life. Jonah found himself truly listening, and sometimes he even shared a story of his own. One night she asked him if he had ever wanted a family. Jonah stared into the flames for a good long while. "Once," he admitted, "when I was younger. After my folks died, family just seemed like another word for heartache." "And now?" she asked softly. "Now? I do not know." He glanced over at her. "What about you?" "I used to," she said, her voice distant. "I would dream of a house full of people who wanted me there. Not because I was useful, but just for being me." She gave a sad little smile. "But that was a long time ago." "Maybe it does not have to be," Jonah heard himself say. Mara looked at him, her eyes wide with a raw and uncertain hope. "What are you saying?" He had not really known until that moment. Sitting there in the firelight with this woman who had felt unwanted her entire life, he knew one thing. He did not want her to feel that way ever again. "I am saying maybe we can build something here," he said carefully. "More than just four walls and a roof." "Like what?" she whispered. "Like a life." Her breath caught. For a long moment there was only the sound of the fire. Then she gave a slow, deliberate nod. "All right," she said. "Let's try." As December's snows finally eased, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked side by side during the day. Their evenings were filled with conversation. It was not love, not yet, but it was a foundation. One morning, Jonah found her staring out the frosted window. "You all right?" he asked. She did not turn. "Do you ever feel like you are just waiting for something to go wrong?" Jonah came and stood near her. "All the time." "How do you deal with it?" "I do not," he said with a shrug. I just keep going, one day at a time. Mara finally turned to look at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes. It was not a fear of him, but of hope itself, a fear of believing this good, fragile thing they were building might actually last. "What if I ruin this?" she whispered. "You will not. You do not know that." "No," Jonah admitted. "But it is a risk I am willing to take if you are." Mara searched his face. Then very slowly she nodded. "Okay." They stood together, looking out at the frozen world, and something settled in Jonah's chest. For now, trying was enough. Christmas came and went without any fuss. They shared a slightly bigger meal by the fire. "I have never had a Christmas like this," Mara said. "Like what?" "Peaceful." Jonah thought of all the holidays he had spent alone in cold silence. This was better. "Me neither," he said. And then Mara smiled. It was a real, genuine smile, and it felt like it cracked something open deep inside him. He had spent so long believing that closeness only led to pain. But maybe it just meant risk, and maybe some risks were worth taking. As January rolled in, Jonah noticed the changes. Mara's laugh came easier. She moved around the cabin like she owned the place, adding small touches that turned it from a shelter into a home. She mended an old quilt, hung a proper coat hook, and even arranged some pine cones on the mantel. And Jonah, well, he started to relax. He looked forward to their evenings by the fire, to the sound of her voice in the quiet. One night she said, "I think this is the first place I have ever felt like I belonged." Jonah looked at her, and the words came out before he could stop them. "You do belong here." Mara's whole face lit up with a smile that was hesitant but true. She told him, "So do you." And right then, Jonah knew. Somewhere down the road, without even trying, he had stopped being a man alone. They had become something more, something he did not have a word for. But whatever it was, it sure felt like coming home. Trouble arrived on a Tuesday late in February. The knock was so quiet at first, Jonah figured the wind was playing tricks on him. He was out back splitting firewood while Mara was inside fixing to make their lunch. A heavy gray sky promised more snow, and the world had gone still and quiet, the way it always does before a storm. Then the knock came again, a bit louder. Jonah set down his axe. Folks did not just show up out here. The cabin was too far out, the trails too rough in winter. He came around the side of the house and just stopped. A young girl, maybe 12 years old, stood there looking thin as a fence post. Her coat was way too big, and her boots were coming apart at the seams. And she was holding a bundle of old blankets like it was the most precious thing in the world. Behind her stood a boy a few years older with his hand on her shoulder and eyes as wide and watchful as a deer's. "Please," the girl said, her voice just a crackle. "We need help," she pleaded. Jonah's first thought was to say no. He built this life to get away from other people's problems. But before a word could come out, Mara was at the door. She took one long look at that shivering girl and the bundle she was clutching. "Get them inside," she said, "right now." There was no arguing with that tone. Jonah stepped back, and the girl nearly fell into the cabin, with her brother right behind her. Mara led them straight to the fireplace, talking low and easy. The cold was biting, so Jonah shut the door tight behind them. "Sit down," Mara told the girl, pointing her to a chair. "What is your name?" "Emma," she whispered. "And this here is my brother, Daniel." The boy just nodded, his eyes scanning every corner of the room like he was looking for a way out if things went south. Mara asked her gently, "What is in the blanket?" Emma hugged the bundle tighter, and that is when Jonah heard it. A tiny, weak cry, like a newborn kitten. "My baby sister," Emma said, her voice finally breaking. "Her name is Grace. She is only 6 months old." Mara knelt down in front of Emma, her face turning serious. "Let me see her." Emma waited a second, then carefully pulled back the blanket. The baby inside was so small. Her little face was red and wet with sweat, and she was barely breathing. Even from across the room, Jonah could tell that baby was sick in a bad way. Mara's jaw set hard. "How long has she been this way?" "3 days," Emma cried. "Maybe 4, I'm not sure." "You did good," Mara cut in, her voice firm as an old oak. "You got her here. That is what counts." She looked up at Jonah, her eyes on fire. "I need boiling water and every last blanket we own." Jonah moved without a second thought. He put the kettle on the fire and pulled all the blankets from their bed and storage chest. Behind him, Mara was already unwrapping the baby with sure, gentle hands. "Where are your parents?" Mara asked without looking up. Emma's face just fell apart. "They are gone. Mama passed when Grace was born, and our papa, he took a fever last month. Have you been on your own all this time? We tried to get to town." Daniel finally spoke, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But the snow got too deep, and Grace started getting worse. We saw the smoke from your chimney. We just did not know what else to do." Mara did not say anything for a moment. She was focused on the baby whose skin was hot as a skillet. Her little chest rattled with every breath. "Pneumonia," Mara said softly, mostly to herself, "or something mighty close to it. Can you help her?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Mara looked right at the girl with a look Jonah had never seen before, fierce and protective. "I'm going to try my best," she said, "but you have to trust me." Emma nodded, wiping away her tears. "Good," Mara said, then turned to Jonah. "I need you to ride to town. We need willow bark from the doctor and honey." Jonah just stared at her. "That is a 15-mile ride in this weather." "I know," Mara said, her voice steady as a rock, "but this baby will not make it through the night without it. You know that." He looked at that tiny infant, fighting for every breath, and knew she was right. Riding into a blizzard was a fool's errand, but staying here and doing nothing was worse. "All right," he said, "I will go." Mara's shoulders slumped in relief. "Thank you." Jonah grabbed his heavy coat and hat. "Keep that fire roaring," he said at the door. "I will," she promised. Their eyes met, and the weight of it all settled on them. Then he nodded once and stepped out into the biting wind. The ride to Ember Hollow was a pure misery. The wind cut deep, and the snow fell so thick he could hardly see. By the time he got to the doctor's house, his whole face was numb. The old doctor was grumpy at first, but when Jonah told him about the baby, his tone changed. "Pneumonia in a baby," he said, shaking his head. "That is real bad." "What can you give me?" Jonah asked, desperate. The doctor came back with a little bottle and a jar. "This is a willow bark tincture, and this here is honey with elderberry. Give her just a few drops at a time. Keep her warm, give her water, and say a prayer." Jonah paid the man and headed back into the storm. The ride home was even worse. The cold settled deep in his bones, but he pushed on, thinking of Mara and that sick little girl. He finally stumbled back into the cabin around midnight. Mara was right where he had left her, holding the baby by the fire. The other 2 children were asleep in the corner, buried under a pile of blankets. "Did you get it?" she asked, her face pale with worry. He nodded, handing her the precious bottles. He knelt beside her, and together they gently gave the baby a few drops of the medicine. She whimpered, but she swallowed. "Now we wait," Mara whispered. Jonah was shaking from the cold and exhaustion, but he forced himself to get into dry clothes and eat some stew. Across the room, Mara never stopped her quiet work, her hands sure and steady. He watched her and saw a strength he had never truly understood. She was a fighter. For 2 long days they fought right alongside that tiny baby. They took turns holding her, giving her medicine, and whispering words of encouragement. On the 3rd morning, the fever finally broke. Grace's breathing eased, and for the first time, she opened her eyes and looked right at Mara. A week later, the storm had passed, leaving the world clean and white. The cabin was no longer quiet. It was filled with the sounds of a baby's coo and the soft chatter of 2 grateful children. Jonah looked at Mara holding Grace by the window with Emma and Daniel watching over her shoulder. They were not just visitors anymore. They were family. And Jonah knew deep in his bones that this was the home he had been looking for all along. He had first chosen her because he figured no one else would have. But looking at her now, he realized he would have chosen her anyway. He would have chosen her not from pity, but because she was remarkable, and he had just been too blind to see it. That realization was fresh in his mind the night the children arrived. The baby, Grace, was fighting for every breath while Mara tended to her. The little boy, Daniel, watched her with wide, frightened eyes. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. Mara did not look up from her work. "Because someone should have done the same for me once," she said simply. "And they did not." Daniel just stared at her, then nodded. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," she said gently. "Go get some sleep." Jonah watched her for a long moment, seeing the exhaustion settle on her. He crossed the room. "Let me take her for a while," he said. "You need to rest." "I am all right." He knelt beside her. "You have been holding her for hours, Mara. Let me help." She finally gave in, her exhaustion winning the battle. She carefully transferred the tiny, warm baby into Jonah's arms, showing him how to support the little head. Grace felt so small, so light. It was terrifying. He had held tools and weapons his whole life, but never anything so fragile. "Talk to her," Mara said, her voice tired. "Babies respond to a voice." "What do I say?" "Anything. Just let her know she is not alone." Jonah looked down at the baby's flushed face, feeling completely helpless. But Mara was watching him, so he cleared his throat and began. "All right, Grace," he said quietly. "Listen to me. You have got people fighting for you. Your brother and sister, they walked through a blizzard to get you here. And Mara, she is not going to let you go. So you need to fight too, you hear me? You need to hold on." The baby made a tiny sound and Jonah's heart clenched. He kept talking, his voice low and steady, telling her all about the mountains and the sky. He told stories about the sunrise breaking over the peaks and the deer that stepped quiet-like to drink from the creek. It felt important to fill the silence, just like Mara said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Jonah felt the pure weight of her trust and her hope. They just sat there, two people with a fading baby, trying to get through the longest night of their lives. A cold, gray dawn finally came, and it brought a change with it. Grace's breathing, so shallow and rough all night, started to get steady. Her fever broke right around sunrise. When Mara checked her, she let out a shaky breath. "It is dropping," she whispered. Jonah shut his eyes as relief washed over him. "She is going to make it." "I think so," Mara said, "but we have to keep a close watch." Emma woke up then, her eyes going straight to the baby. "She is better," Mara told her with the first real smile in hours. "She is going to be all right." Emma started crying, and Daniel pulled her in for a tight hug. Jonah stood up stiffly and handed Grace back to Mara, who cradled her close. Jonah saw tears on Mara's cheeks too. "You did it," he said, his voice low. "We did it," she corrected him. "I could not have done this without you." Jonah just gave a nod and got busy with the fire, not knowing what else to say. He could hear Mara talking softly to the children, calming them down and making plans. For the first time, Jonah let himself wonder what in the world came next. They could not just send them back out there, not with a baby in the dead of winter. That meant they were staying, and that meant everything was about to change. Later that morning, Jonah and Mara stepped outside. The storm was gone, leaving behind a clean, sharp air and a world covered in fresh snow. "What are we going to do?" Jonah asked her. Mara took a moment, her breath making a little cloud in the cold. "We keep them." "What other choice do we have, Mara? We barely have enough food for us. 3 more mouths to feed is a lot." "I know," she said, turning to him with a fire in her eyes. "It is going to be hard, but we cannot send them away. You know it, and I know it." Jonah ran a hand through his hair. He knew she was right, but it was frustrating. "This is not what we planned for." "No," Mara said, "it is not. But maybe it is what we need." What are you talking about? She paused, looking for the right words. My whole life, I was the one nobody wanted. You have spent your whole life alone. Maybe this is a chance to build something that really matters. Jonah looked at her and saw the hope in her eyes, daring him to believe it too. He realized then that Mara was more than just some woman he had chosen. He had come to trust her, to admire her. All right, he said at last, we will figure it out. Mara's face lit up with a smile as she reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you. Jonah squeezed back. They stood there together, looking out at the frozen land, knowing their quiet life was gone for good. The cabin, once big enough for two, was now crowded with 5 people. Emma and Daniel needed food and clothes and comfort. Baby Grace needed attention all day and all night. Mara threw herself into caring for them, and Jonah did his best to keep up. He built a new sleeping platform for the older kids and a small cradle for the baby. He hunted and fished more than ever, carefully rationing what they had. Day by day, they found a new rhythm. Emma was a tough little thing, always helping Mara with chores or keeping Grace happy. Daniel was quieter, and Jonah saw the heavy burden in the boy's eyes. He felt responsible for his sisters. One afternoon, Jonah found Daniel staring out at the mountains. You thinking about heading out? Jonah asked him. Daniel jumped, then shook his head. No, I just keep thinking about my pa. He would want me to take care of them. I could not save him, and I almost lost Grace. Jonah looked at the boy for a long time. You got them here, he said. That is what counts. The rest of it, that is on all of us now. Daniel looked up surprised. You mean you are really keeping us? Looks that way. Why? Jonah gave him the same answer he had heard from Mara. Because someone should. The boy just nodded, his throat tight with gratitude, and went back inside. That night, with the children playing a game by the fire and Grace asleep in Mara's arms, Jonah felt something settle deep inside him. It felt something like peace. Mara caught his eye and smiled, and Jonah smiled right back. They were building something, all right. It was messy, and it was complicated, but it was theirs. When March came, the thaw turned everything to mud. They all realized their food supply was not going to last. Jonah had planned for 2 people through the winter, not 5. One night he sat by candlelight doing the math. The flour would be gone in about 3 weeks. The dried meat might last a month if they were careful, but growing kids were always hungry. The numbers just did not add up. Mara found him there, his face tight with worry. How bad is it? She asked. Bad enough, Jonah said, rubbing his eyes. We could go into town, trade for more supplies. With what? We do not have anything left to trade. Then we ask for credit, or we ask for help. Jonah's jaw got tight. The idea of asking anyone for help felt wrong. He had built his whole life on being self-sufficient. That was his armor. The minute you start depending on other folks, you give them power over you. I know what you are thinking, Mara told him. She could read his face like a book. But this is not about your pride anymore. We have 3 children who are counting on us. I know that. Then let go of this idea that you have to do it all by yourself. Her voice was soft but strong. That is not strength, Jonah. That is just being scared. Her words hit him hard because he knew they were true. He had been afraid his whole life, afraid of needing anyone. But that life was gone, changed forever the day he chose Mara, and changed again when they opened their door to those 3 kids. All right, he finally said. We will go to town together. Mara reached over the table and took his hand. Her touch calmed him more than he wanted to admit. They left 2 days later, all 5 of them piled in a wagon Jonah borrowed from his neighbor, a tough old homesteader named Samuel who lived 5 miles to the east. It felt like every soul in Ember Hollow was staring as Jonah's wagon rumbled into town. Folks in small towns have a way of knowing your business, and he figured they were all whispering about the man who'd taken in orphans when he could barely feed himself. Let them talk. Inside the trading post, Clarence Hooper looked up, a slick smile spreading across his face. Well now, Jonah Reed, he said, his eyes flicking over to Mara and the children huddled by the door. I heard you picked up some strays. Jonah ignored the jab. We need supplies, he said flatly. Flour, salt, whatever you can spare. Hooper leaned back. That'll cost you a pretty penny. Don't see you carrying any coin. I can work it off, Jonah replied. I hunt, trap, build. That's a mighty big tab for a man in your spot. Jonah's blood began to boil, but Mara stepped right up before he could say a word. Her voice was calm and steady. We are not asking for a handout. My husband is offering his labor for goods, which is a fair trade. Hooper's eyes narrowed when she said, husband. It hit Jonah then that their arrangement was not official in the eyes of the law. But hearing her claim the title so boldly sent a warmth right through his chest. Fine, Hooper finally grumbled. But I want this debt paid by summer, with interest. Half the usual rate, Mara shot back. We are caring for children nobody else would take. That ought to count for something. Hooper looked ready to argue, but the quiet strength in Mara's gaze made him back down. Fine, half rate. But get it in writing. They signed the papers, and Jonah felt a mix of relief and shame. He hated owing any man anything. But as they loaded up the wagon, he knew his pride was not worth more than their survival. Just as they were leaving, a woman with kind eyes called out, Jonah Reed, my name is Margaret Talbot. I heard what you and your wife did. It was a noble thing. I have some clothes my own boys have outgrown, she offered with a smile. Jonah nearly refused out of habit, but Mara accepted for them. That is very kind of you, Mrs. Talbot. We would be grateful. A little while later, Margaret returned with a large bundle of clean clothes and a bag of apples. Daniel held an apple like it was a priceless treasure. Thank you, ma'am, he whispered. As their wagon finally rolled out of town, Jonah felt a change deep inside him. The debt still felt like a stone in his stomach, but there was a new feeling, too, a warmth that came from a neighbor's kindness. He looked over at Mara, who was already mending a shirt for Daniel. He saw the kids in the back, their faces happy and smudged with apple juice. Maybe, he thought, they were doing more than just getting by. Maybe they were building a real family. You are better at this than I am, Jonah told her quietly. At what, she asked. Accepting help, letting folks in. Mara's face softened. I have been on the other side. I know how it feels when no one offers a hand, so I sure do appreciate it when someone does. Jonah nodded. He had kept the world at a distance for so long he had forgotten how to let anyone get close. But Mara, after all she had been through, still knew how to connect with people, and she was teaching him how to do it too. They made one last stop. Jonah had been thinking hard ever since Mara had called him her husband. He realized he wanted it to be true. He led them all into the territorial judge's small office. We want to get married, Jonah announced. The tired-looking judge looked up from his papers. Both of you? Yes, Mara said, taking Jonah's hand. Both of us. Well, I reckon I can do that, the judge said. But you are going to need some witnesses. Daniel spoke up right away. We can do it. Emma and me. We will be the witnesses. The judge looked skeptical. You are just children. We are family, Emma said, holding baby Grace tightly. And family is supposed to witness things. That girl's fierce look must have done the trick, because the judge just sighed and got out the right papers. A few minutes later, Jonah and Mara stood before him, holding hands. Do you, Jonah Reed, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife? Jonah looked at Mara, the woman who had fought so hard for her place in the world, the woman who had become his whole world. I do, he said, and he meant it more than anything. And do you, Mara Ellison, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband? Tears welled in Mara's eyes, but her voice was strong. I do. Well then, the judge said, looking a bit amused, by the power given to me by the Montana Territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You can go on and kiss the bride now, I suppose. They had never kissed before. But Mara smiled and leaned in, giving him a short, gentle kiss that sent a jolt right through him. When they parted, Emma was crying happy tears and Daniel was grinning from ear to ear. Even little Grace seemed to understand how big this moment was, just cooing as quiet as could be. The judge looked them over, his face all business. "Congratulations," he said without a lick of warmth, as he handed over the paper. "Try and make it through the winter." They pointed the wagon out of Ember Hollow while the sun bled all over the sky, leaving town with more than just supplies. They were leaving with a future. Jonah stole a look at Mara, her face glowing in that soft, dying light. He was a husband now, a father to 3 children who weren't his by blood, but who had already claimed his heart. The thought was terrifying, and it was the truest thing he had ever done. Beside him, Mara held Grace and hummed a sweet, low tune that was lulling the baby right to sleep. "You doing all right over there?" Mara asked, her voice soft. Jonah nodded. "Yeah, I reckon I am." She gave a little smile. "No second thoughts about hitching your wagon to mine?" He shook his head. "Not a one." "Good," she said, looking radiant. "Me neither." The horse was tired by the time they got home, but a strange peace had settled over them. The kids helped unload, full of new energy now that they knew there was food for the pantry. Inside, the cabin already smelled of coffee and the fresh bread a neighbor had sent with them. For the first time, it really felt like a home. In the weeks that followed, they found their rhythm. Jonah was up before the sun and worked till dark, getting the land ready and hunting to keep their bellies full. Daniel stuck to his side like a shadow, soaking up everything. Jonah found himself teaching the boy all the things his own daddy had taught him. How to read a storm in the clouds, how to track a deer, and how to make things last. The boy learned fast. One morning, watching Daniel split firewood with a steady hand, Jonah felt a surge of pride that nearly knocked him off his feet. "You're getting mighty good at that," Jonah told him. Daniel stopped, wiping the sweat from his face. "You really think so?" "I know so. Your father would have been proud." The boy's face lit up, but then a shadow crossed it. "Do you ever think about him?" Daniel asked. "I never knew him, but I think about what a fine man he must have been to raise y'all. That takes a special kind of strength." Daniel's voice went quiet. "He was a good man. He just couldn't beat the fever." "Ain't no man alive can beat a fever," Jonah said gently. "That's not a weakness, son. That's just how life is out here." Daniel swallowed hard, looking at the ground. "I'm just glad we found you. I know we ain't really your kids, but—" Jonah cut him off. "You are mine," he said, his voice firm. "All 3 of you. Blood don't make a family, Daniel. Choice does. And I choose y'all." The boy's eyes shined with tears he tried to hide. "Thanks," he mumbled. Jonah clapped him on the shoulder, feeling how the boy was starting to fill out. He'd be a man before they knew it, and Jonah aimed to make sure he was a good one. "Come on," Jonah said, "let's go check the traps. I'll show you how to read the signs the critters leave behind." They spent the afternoon in the woods, with Jonah pointing out the little things, a turned leaf, a bent twig. The boy was a natural. As they walked home with 3 rabbits for the pot, Jonah said, "You got a real knack for this." Daniel admitted, "I like it out here, learning things. It makes me feel—" He looked for the right word. "Useful." "You are useful," Jonah said. "More than that, you're capable. Be proud of that." A real warm smile spread across Daniel's face. Jonah felt that pride swell up again. He was starting to understand that being a father wasn't just about putting a roof over their heads. It was about building a person up and showing them their own worth. Inside the cabin, Mara was doing the very same thing with Emma. She didn't just teach the girl to cook and sew. In the afternoon, she'd get out a slate and teach Emma her letters and numbers. "Why do I need to learn this?" Emma asked one day. "Because knowing how to read and write gives a woman choices," Mara explained. "If you can read a contract or write a letter for help, you don't depend on anyone else to tell you what's what. You can make your own way in this world." Emma looked up at her, her face serious. "Is that what you did?" Made your own way? I surely tried, Mara said. And knowing my letters saved me more than once. Has anyone ever truly helped you with no strings attached? Mara thought about how many times she had been turned away. No one had, not until Jonah. He was the first soul to offer a hand without asking what was in it for him. Emma spoke softly, saying, "He is a good man." Mara squeezed the girl's hand and said, "He sure is, and you are a good girl. You are smart and kind. Don't you ever let anybody tell you different." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she leaned into Mara's embrace. Little Grace sensed the feeling in the room and climbed right into Mara's lap, making a happy tangle of arms and legs. This was more than just a roof and food. This was building someone up, showing them they had worth. It made Mara's heart feel full to bursting. This was the dream of a lonely little girl come true. She was finally surrounded by folks who loved her, who wanted her there. That evening at dinner, with fresh garden vegetables and homemade bread on the table, Jonah looked at his new family and felt something change deep inside him. This was it. This was the life he had been missing all those lonely years up in the mountains. He cleared his throat and said, "I want to say something." Everyone looked up. "I know this has not been easy, but I want y'all to know. Emma, Daniel, Grace, this is your home now. It is yours for as long as you want it." Emma's eyes filled with happy tears. Daniel swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. "You mean it?" Emma whispered. Jonah nodded. "I mean it. We are a family now, and family does not give up on each other." "Thank you," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, "for not turning us away." "You do not have to thank us," Mara said gently. "You belong with us now." Grace banged her spoon on the table, adding her own little punctuation to the moment, and everyone laughed. Later that night, Jonah and Mara stood in the doorway looking out at the life they were building. "Do you ever miss it?" Mara asked. "The quiet? The being alone?" Jonah thought about it honestly. He admitted sometimes, but not enough to ever go back. Mara agreed, saying, "Me neither." They stood there in a comfortable silence. Jonah realized he had spent 15 years thinking that being alone meant being safe. He thought needing no one meant no one could ever hurt him. But he had been wrong. Real safety was not being isolated. It was in connecting with people, in building something that could stand against any storm. He said quietly, "We did good." "We sure did," Mara replied. And Jonah Reed, the man who chose the woman nobody else wanted, knew he had made the best choice of his entire life. The next morning, though, brought visitors. Jonah was mending a corral fence when he heard the sound of horses. He reached for his rifle out of habit, but then relaxed when he saw it was Samuel Talbot and 2 other men from the settlement. "Morning, Jonah," Samuel called out. "Hope we are not bothering you." "Not at all," Jonah said, though he was still a little on edge. 3 men riding up unannounced usually meant trouble. Samuel and the others got down from their horses. They were good men, Peter Harris and James Crawford. But Jonah could not figure why they had come all this way. Samuel got straight to the point. "We heard about you taking in those orphans. We figured you could use some help getting your fields ready for planting." Jonah just stared. "Help?" "That is right," Peter said, pointing to a wagon loaded with tools and seed. "We figure with all of us working, we can get your fields plowed and even get a start on that extra room you are going to need." Jonah's throat felt tight. He said, "I cannot pay you for this." James, the blacksmith, grunted, "Who asked for pay?" "You are doing a good thing here, Reed, taking care of children with nowhere else to go. That is something worth supporting." "Besides," Samuel added with a smile, "Margaret would have my hide if I did not offer to help." Jonah was speechless. He had been on his own for so long, the idea of help freely given was a foreign concept. Before he could find his words, Mara came out of the cabin. "Gentlemen," she said with a warm smile, "this is mighty kind of y'all. Please come on in. I will get some coffee going." As the men started unloading their wagon, young Daniel came and stood by Jonah's side, his eyes wide. "Are they really here to help us?" the boy asked. "Looks that way," Jonah answered, still taking it all in. "But why?" Jonah looked down at the boy and knew this was an important moment. Because this is what a community does, son. When someone needs a hand, others step up. Not for pay, but because it is the right thing to do. But you always said we had to do everything on our own. Jonah took a deep breath. I was wrong about that. Being self-reliant is good, but knowing how to accept help is just as important. Daniel nodded, his face lit up with understanding. Can I help them? Absolutely, Jonah said. Go ask Mr. Talbot what you can do. The boy ran off full of purpose. The day turned into a whirlwind of good, hard work. The men worked with an easy friendship, teaching Daniel as they went. By noon, they had plowed 2 whole fields and laid the foundation for a new room on the cabin. They all crowded around the small cabin for lunch, filling it with laughter. Peter told Jonah, Your wife is a fine cook. Jonah smiled, watching Mara make sure everyone had enough to eat. She is, he agreed. James added, and those are well-mannered children. You are doing right by them. We are trying, Jonah said. Samuel chuckled. That is all any parent can do. You just keep trying, and they usually turn out all right. Margaret and I have 4 boys, and every single one of them tested us, but we would not trade them for anything. Jonah glanced over at Daniel, who was listening to the men's stories. The boy caught his eye and smiled a real, genuine smile. No, Jonah said quietly to Samuel, I suppose you would not. By late afternoon, the place looked completely different. The fields were ready, and the frame for the new room was up. As the men got ready to ride home, Samuel pulled Jonah aside. I know this is hard for you, accepting help, he said. Margaret told me you have always kept to yourself, but you have a family now, and a family needs a community. Things are going to get hard, Jonah. That is just how life is. But it is bearable when you have people standing with you. I am not used to depending on anyone, Jonah admitted. Then you had better get used to it, Samuel said firmly, because those children are watching you. They are learning how to be in this world from you. Do you want them to think they have to face everything alone? Or do you want them to know that asking for help is a strength, not a weakness? The words hit Jonah right in the heart. He knew Samuel was right. Thank you, Jonah said, for today and for the lesson. Samuel clapped him on the shoulder. Any time. That is what neighbors are for. As the men rode off, Mara came and slipped her hand into his. That was a good thing, she said. It was, Jonah agreed. I'm not sure I deserved it. She squeezed his hand. You did. We both did. Mara looked straight at him. You have spent your whole life thinking you had to earn every little thing, that you had to prove yourself day in and day out. But sometimes, people help just because they want to. They see something good and want to give it a boost. Is that what we are? Something good? Yes, Mara said, without a lick of doubt. We are taking care of children who need us. We are building a home. We are trying to be better people. That is about as good as it gets. Jonah pulled her in close, resting his chin on her head. When did you get so dang smart? I have always been smart. You just never noticed. He let out a laugh that surprised even him. When had it become so easy to laugh? When had he started looking forward to joy instead of fear in it? That night, as they lay in bed, the newness of being husband and wife still feeling fresh, Mara spoke up. I need to tell you something. Jonah pushed himself up on his elbow, trying to read her face in the low light of the fire. The look in her eyes, a mix of nerves and hope, made his heart jump. What is it? I'm pregnant. The words tumbled out of her. I am almost certain of it. She looked at his face, waiting. Please, say something. Jonah opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Pregnant. A baby. Their baby. The idea was so huge, so life-changing, his mind just stalled. Jonah. Mara's voice was quiet now, full of doubt. If you do not want to... No, he said, finding his voice at last. He pulled her tight against him. I am just surprised, that is all. But this is good news, it is. He leaned back to see her better. Are you happy about it? Tears welled up in Mara's eyes. I am terrified and happy and then terrified all over again. Jonah laughed and relief washed over him. Yeah, me too. They lay there in the quiet dark, her head on his chest and his hand resting on her belly. A baby. Another soul to love and protect. The weight of it should have scared him. And it did, a little. But mostly, it just felt right. This was what life was supposed to be. Not just getting by, but growing and building something new. We probably ought to tell the children soon, Mara said after a bit. Yeah, but not just yet. Let us keep this our secret for a little while. Mara agreed. They needed this time. This moment was just for the two of them before their news belonged to the world. Jonah. Mara's voice was getting sleepy. Yeah, I love you. Those words could still make his heart stop. I love you too. As she drifted off, he stared at the ceiling and thought about their future. He thought about the child coming in the fall, and about Emma and Daniel and Grace growing up right here. This frontier life was not going to be easy, but they would face it together, him and Mara and their growing family, and that made all the difference in the world. The morning they told the children, spring was in full bloom. The table was quiet as everyone ate breakfast. Emma and Daniel could tell something important was about to be said. Mara looked at Jonah, who gave her a nod. She took a deep breath. We have some news, she started. This coming fall, our family is going to get a little bigger. I am going to have a baby. The room was dead silent for a second. Then Emma's face broke into a huge smile. Really? A baby? She looked back and forth between them, her eyes shining. Our baby? Yes, Mara said, her own smile getting wider. Your little brother or sister. Emma let out a happy squeal and jumped up to give Mara a careful hug. This is the best news ever. I can help take care of it and teach it things. Oh, we will need a cradle. Hold on there, Jonah said with a chuckle. We have got some time for all that. Daniel had been quiet, thinking hard. Now he spoke up. Are you happy about it, Ma? The word Ma made Mara's heart swell. None of the children had ever called her that. I am very happy, Mara said, her voice catching. Scared, too, but mostly happy. Good, Daniel said, breaking into a grin. Because I think it is great. Grace needs somebody her own size to boss around. Grace, hearing her name, clapped and yelled, Baby! So loud it made everyone laugh. So, y'all are okay with this? Jonah asked, just to be sure. We are a family, Daniel said simply. That is what families do. They grow. Jonah felt a lump in his throat. This boy, no, this young man, had so much wisdom. He knew he had played a part in that. Yes, he said, that is exactly what they do. The next few weeks were a flurry of getting ready. Emma started knitting tiny blankets. Daniel helped Jonah add a small room onto the cabin for a nursery. And Grace patted Mara's belly and said, Baby, every chance she got. Samuel Talbot came back with wood and tools, just like he promised, to help build a proper cradle. He showed them how to make the joints fit just right. A child's first bed ought to be made with love, Samuel told them. Daniel soaked up every word, his confidence growing each day. One afternoon, Margaret Talbot stopped by with a basket full of supplies. I have brought you everything you will need, she said, unpacking soft cloths and little gowns. And when your time comes, I will be right here to help you. Thank you, Mara said, touched by her kindness. How can I ever repay you? You do not repay it, Margaret said softly. You pass it on. That is how a community is supposed to work. After she left, Mara sat surrounded by the gifts, crying happy tears. Emma found her and got worried. Ma, what is wrong? Nothing, sweetheart, Mara said, pulling her close. These are happy tears. It's almost too much, Mara whispered, her voice catching. Just a year ago, I had absolutely nothing, and now I have everything. Emma pulled her into a tight hug. You deserve every bit of it. You're the best mama anyone could hope for. Those words opened a floodgate inside Mara. She finally let go of all the lonely years, crying them out as Emma held her. Jonah came in later, finding them wrapped around each other. He didn't say a word, just sat and put his big arms around them both. Over Emma's head, Mara met his gaze, her heart full of a gratitude too deep for words. He looked back, his eyes soft and knowing. In that quiet room, they were a family. As spring turned to summer, the homestead came alive. The fields promised a good harvest, and Emma's garden filled their plates with fresh food. The children were thriving, growing taller and more sure of themselves. Daniel got his first deer in early June, a clean shot he made all by himself. He walked back to the cabin, just beaming with pride. Jonah clasped his shoulder, his voice full of respect. "Well done, son. You're a true provider now." Daniel looked at Emma. "Pa taught me everything. How to track, how to wait, and how to make the shot count. He's the best teacher there is." Emma smiled, looking up from her mending. "He's the best father, too. We're lucky he chose us." Daniel shook his head. "We chose each other. That's what makes it real." Jonah, hearing them from outside, knew the boy was right. They had chosen each other, and that was a choice they made again every single day. Late one afternoon, Jonah said they should head into Ember Hollow for supplies. He wanted to show the town what they'd built and stand together as a family, proud and strong. They arrived on a busy Saturday, walking down the main street together, a solid unit. Folks stared, just like Jonah knew they would, but this time their looks were filled with curiosity, not judgment. They went to the trading post first, where Clarence Hooper actually smiled at them. "Reed family," he said. "Good to see y'all. Here, congratulations are in order." "Word gets around," Jonah replied. Hooper tallied their flour and sugar. "You're making good headway on that debt. Keep this up. You'll be clear by fall." "That's the plan," Jonah said, laying down some fine pelts. Hooper nodded, impressed. "Quality work. Your boy do any of these?" "3 of them," Jonah said with pride. Daniel stood a little taller. As they left, folks stopped to greet them, congratulating them on the baby and asking about their life. It was a good feeling, this sudden acceptance. They finally made their way to the judge's office. "We want to make the adoption official," Jonah said, straight to the point. "Legal and binding. Emma, Daniel, and Grace Reed." The judge looked up, a spark in his tired eyes. "Was wondering when y'all would get in here. Been sitting on these papers for weeks." "You knew we'd want this?" Mara asked, surprised. "Anyone with eyes can see you're a family," the judge said. "But making it legal gives those children protection and a proper future." He pulled out the documents. The paperwork didn't take long, but it changed everything. When they walked out, Emma, Daniel, and Grace were legally theirs. No longer orphans, but a permanent part of the family. Emma cried, and Daniel tried not to, but failed. Grace, feeling the moment, just patted their faces and said, "Family," until they all laughed through the tears. "Can we go to the general store?" Emma asked when they'd settled down. "I want to buy fabric for the baby's quilt with my own money." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "Your own money?" Emma showed him a small cloth purse full of coins. "I've been selling eggs to Mrs. Henderson. She pays me 2 cents a dozen. I've saved up almost $1. Jonah looked at Mara, who just smiled. "She asked if she could. I didn't see the harm." "Well, that's mighty entrepreneurial of you, Emma," Jonah said, his chest swelling with pride. At the store, Emma carefully picked out a soft yellow cotton and a pale green calico. "Yellow for sunshine," she explained to Daniel, "and green for growth." "She's going to be a great big sister," her brother whispered to Jonah. "She already is," Jonah replied, watching Emma count out her coins. As they were fixing to leave town, they saw one last person. It was the woman who had stood next to Mara on that bride platform. She looked thin and worn out. Her eyes seemed empty. After a moment, Mara walked over to her. "Hello?" she said softly. The woman looked up, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You're the one that scarred man chose." "I am," Mara said calmly. "My name is Mara Reed now." The woman's gaze drifted to Jonah and the children. "You look happy." "I am," Mara said. Very happy. Did you find a good match? The woman's face fell. I did, but he wasn't. She trailed off, unable to finish. Mara reached out and squeezed her hand. I'm sorry. I know how it feels to be unwanted. But you're not unwanted now, the woman said with wonder in her voice. You have all this. I do, Mara agreed. And I hope you find the same. You deserve happiness too. As they walked away, Emma slipped her hand into Mara's. That was kind of you. She just needed someone to see her, Mara said. The way your father saw me. They rode home in the warm afternoon light, their wagon full of supplies and their hearts full of peace. As the cabin came into view, Daniel spoke up. It looks different now. How's that? Jonah asked. I don't know. Fuller, maybe. Like it's really alive. Jonah knew exactly what he meant. It was no longer just a cabin made of wood and mud. It was a home, breathing with their laughter and their love. That night, with the children asleep, Jonah and Mara sat on the porch, watching the stars pop out in the dark sky. Thank you, Mara said quietly, for today, for making us a real family, for showing us we matter. You always mattered, Jonah said. I just wish I'd known sooner that life was better with people in it. He pulled her close, his hand resting on her belly. I spent 15 years telling myself I was better off alone. Then you came along and proved me wrong about everything. Not wrong, Mara corrected, just incomplete. We all needed to find the right people. He looked at her. Are we the right people for each other? Yes, Mara said, her voice full of certainty. We absolutely are. The summer grew deeper, bringing long days of hard work and peaceful evenings. The homestead thrived and neighbors started visiting regularly. The Reed family became a part of the community, helping at barn raisings and planning for the future. Jonah, the man who once wanted nothing to do with anyone, was now helping build that community. Daniel soaked it all up, learning from Jonah and the other men who came around. He grew strong and capable, learning about farming, smithing, and raising animals. By the middle of summer, he was nearly as tall as Jonah himself. Jonah, his voice now deep and steady, his confidence solid. You are becoming a man, Jonah told him one evening. Daniel looked at him. Will I be a good one like you? Jonah was taken aback. I'm not so sure I am all that good of a man. Yes, you are, Daniel said with certainty. You took us in. You work hard. You are patient. And you love Ma more than anything. She is, Jonah said. And so are you kids. Daniel got quiet for a moment. When the baby comes, will you love it more than us? Jonah heard the fear in that question, the old worry that love was something you could run out of. No, he said, his voice firm. Love does not work like that. It does not get divided up. It multiplies. I will love the new baby, sure, but that will not take away one bit of my love for you. You understand? Daniel nodded. Yeah, I think I do. You are my son, Daniel. And that is not ever going to change. The boy's eyes were shiny, but he blinked back the tears. Thanks, Pa. I needed to hear that. As Mara's time drew near, the little cabin was humming with anticipation. A cradle stood waiting, filled with the softest linens. Tiny clothes, all washed and folded, were stacked in a newly built shelf. Margaret had come by a couple of times to check on Mara, reassuring them that everything was progressing just as it should. Emma had even finished a special quilt for the baby, a lovely pattern of yellows and greens. In one corner, she had carefully stitched the name of each person in their family. She gave it to Mara one evening, her chest puffed out with a little bit of shy pride. Mara pressed the quilt to her heart, her eyes wet with tears. It is beautiful, she said. The baby will always know it is loved. Emma pointed to the names, explaining, I put all of us on there, so the baby knows it belongs to our family. That is perfect, Mara said, pulling the girl into a warm embrace. You are perfect. The baby decided to arrive on a crisp morning in October. Mara's labor began just before the sun came up. By mid-morning, it was clear the time was close. Daniel had ridden for Margaret, who arrived quickly and took control with a calm and steady hand. Jonah paced back and forth outside with the children, his nerves stretched as tight as a fiddle string. Every small sound from the cabin made his heart jump. Emma held Grace tightly, and both girls looked on with worried faces. Daniel stood next to Jonah, trying his best to look calm, but he was not fooling anybody. She will be all right, Daniel said, though it sounded more like a hope than a fact. Jonah agreed, trying to make his voice sound more certain than he felt. He said, "Your mother is a strong woman." The hours passed by so slowly it was painful. And then, at long last, the clear sound of a newborn's cry filled the air. Jonah felt his knees almost give way from the pure relief of it all. Daniel put a hand on his shoulder to steady him. Emma started to cry happy tears, and little Grace just said, "Baby," with so much joy it broke all the tension. A few minutes later, Margaret came out, tired, but with a big smile. "You have a son," she told Jonah, "and Mara is doing fine. She is asking for you." Jonah hurried inside. He found Mara resting in bed, looking tired but absolutely radiant, with a tiny bundle held in her arms. She looked up at him with a smile that was worth everything. "Come and meet your son," she said. Jonah moved toward the bed slowly, almost like he was in church, and he looked down at his son for the first time. The baby was small and red-faced, with a surprising amount of dark hair. His eyes were just starting to take in the world. One of his tiny hands was curled up by his cheek. As Jonah watched, the baby let out a huge yawn. It was a mighty big yawn for such a little fella. "He is perfect," Jonah said in a hushed voice. Mara agreed. She asked, "What should we name him?" They had talked about names before, but now, holding his son, Jonah knew the right one. "Samuel," he said. "After the first neighbor who helped us, the man who showed me that accepting help is not a weakness." Mara's eyes filled with tears again. "Samuel Reed. I love it," she whispered. "We can call him Sam," Jonah added. He reached out and touched the baby's soft cheek. Sam made a little noise, and his parents both laughed. "He has opinions already," Mara chuckled. "He gets that from his mother," Jonah teased back. The children were allowed to come in then. They gathered around the bed, quiet and full of awe. Emma reached out a finger to touch Sam's hand, and the baby's fingers automatically closed around it. "He is so tiny," Emma whispered. Mara smiled and told her, "You were all this small once." Grace toddled over to get a closer look. "Baby Sam," she announced, patting the blanket. "That is right," Jonah said. He lifted Grace up so she could see her new brother better. Daniel, however, stood back from the group. His face was a mix of happiness and deep thought. Jonah knew what the boy was thinking about. He was remembering his own family, the father he had lost, and the siblings he fought so hard to keep safe. Jonah set Grace down and walked over to Daniel. He put a hand on his shoulder and asked, "Are you all right, son?" Daniel nodded, but his eyes were shiny with unshed tears. He said, "I was just thinking that my father would have loved to see all this, to meet Sam." "I bet he is watching," Jonah said softly. "And I bet he is proud of the man you are becoming. The way you have cared for your sisters, that is his legacy living on in you." Daniel's face crumbled then, and he leaned into Jonah's embrace. Jonah held the boy tightly. "I am proud of you too," Jonah told him. "You are a good man, Daniel, and you are going to be a wonderful big brother." "Thanks, Pa," Daniel whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. They stayed that way for a moment, and Jonah felt the true meaning of fatherhood settle deep in his bones. He was a father not just to Sam, but to all of them. These were his children, brought to him by fate and by choice. The days that followed Sam's birth were a happy kind of chaos. The baby needed attention around the clock, and Mara was worn out, so everyone else pitched in to help. Emma took charge of the cooking and did a surprisingly good job. Daniel handled all the chores outside without even being asked. And Grace was thrilled with her new role as a big sister, always trying to help by fetching things or singing little songs to the baby. Neighbors came by to share in their joy, bringing food, advice, and congratulations. Margaret visited every day to check on Mara and Sam, declaring them both to be healthy. Samuel brought over a rocking chair he had made just for nursing a baby. Other folks brought blankets and clothes and jars of preserved food. "This is what a community is," Margaret told Jonah one afternoon. "It is just people taking care of their own." "I am still getting used to it," Jonah confessed. "You are doing just fine," she said. "All of you are thriving." Jonah looked at his family and knew she was right. He saw Emma helping Grace make a little tower of stones. He saw Daniel chopping wood with steady, confident swings. Through the window, he could see Mara rocking Sam. Margaret was right. They were all thriving. A couple of weeks after Sam was born, Jonah found Mara sitting by the window. She was nursing the baby and watching the evening sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and red. "What are you thinking about?" he asked her. She looked at him with a peaceful smile. "About everything," she said. "About how we ended up here and how much our lives have changed for the better. A year and a half ago, I was standing on a platform, sure that my life was over. I thought I would never belong anywhere." Her voice trembled a little. "And now I have more than I ever dreamed of." "You deserve every bit of it," Jonah told her. "Every bit of happiness and peace. You deserve to be cherished." "So do you," Mara said softly. "You were alone for so long, thinking that was the best way to be. But just look at what we have built together. Look at this family." Jonah looked down at Sam, who was sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. "I never knew," he said quietly. "I never knew life could be like this." Mara asked, "Like what?" "Full," he answered, looking into her eyes. "You showed me what I was missing, Mara." "We did it together," she corrected him gently. "You chose me when nobody else would. You gave me a home. Everything else, we built it, side by side." Sam began to stir, and Mara adjusted him in her arms. Jonah watched her, amazed at how easily she had taken to being a mother. "You are an amazing mother," he told her. "I am trying," she said. "Sometimes I worry that I will mess things up." "You will not," Jonah said firmly. "You love them, and that is what matters most." She asked, "Is it enough?" He answered, "It is everything." Winter came early that year, with snow covering the ground in late October. But the family was ready. Their little cabin was warm and stocked with supplies. They fell into the easy rhythm of winter life, with days spent on indoor chores and long evenings by the fire. Sam grew plump and healthy. His smiles became more frequent and his cries grew stronger. Emma and Grace loved to fuss over him, and Daniel discovered he had a real talent for calming the baby down when he got fussy. "You are good at that," Mara told Daniel one evening. "I used to do this with Grace when she was a baby," he explained. "My ma," he trailed off, the memory still a little painful. "I guess I just never forgot how." "Your mother would be so proud of you," Mara said gently. One day, Daniel asked Mara a direct question. He asked, "Do you ever think about them? Your family, the ones who cast you out?" Mara took a moment before she answered. "Sometimes," she said, "but the anger is gone now. It is more of a sadness for what we all missed out on. I am working on forgiving them. I cannot let their rejection define me anymore. I have a family now that wants me. That is what is important." Daniel nodded. He understood better than most. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That is what matters." As the months passed, the house filled with the happy sounds of a growing family. Sam learned to laugh, and his giggles delighted everyone. He would watch their faces with his bright, curious eyes. Emma even finished another beautiful quilt. Another winter came and went, and then a new baby, little Sam, joined the family. The cabin felt fuller, louder, and more alive than ever. Daniel built a fine toy box for his new brother, and Grace took to being a big sister with all her heart. One evening, Jonah came in from the cold and just stopped in the doorway. Mara was nursing the baby. Emma was reading a story out loud to the others, and Daniel was whittling a small toy. It was just a simple, quiet moment. But it hit Jonah like a lightning bolt. This was his life, a life he had built from scratch. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was full of a love so strong it warmed the whole room. Mara looked up and saw the look on his face. "What is it?" she asked with a smile. "Nothing," Jonah said, his voice a little thick. "Just appreciating." "Appreciating what?" she pressed. "All of this. You, these kids, this home." Emma peered over her book. "Are you getting soft on us, Pa?" Jonah grinned. "Maybe I am." "Is that allowed?" Emma closed the book with a serious look. "It's required," she said. "That's what fathers are for." Everyone laughed, and Jonah sank into his chair, feeling like the richest man in the whole wide world. Jonah pulled little Grace right onto his lap, and she settled in against his chest, her thumb finding its way to her mouth. He just held her, breathing in the moment. This right here, this was what he'd been searching for his whole life without even knowing it. It was not about being alone or free from duty. It was about belonging, the good and heavy weight of people who needed him, and who he surely needed back. As spring blossomed and baby Sam turned 6 months old, the Reed family got ready for their first big planting season. The children were sprouting like weeds. Emma shot up a few inches, Daniel's shoulders got even broader, and Grace was now talking in complete sentences. They were a real team, with everyone pulling their own weight. One morning, getting ready for a supply run, Mara spoke up. "I reckon we should bring the adoption papers to town. Let folks see what we've made here." Jonah, curious, asked her why. "Because," she said, "people need to see that a family can be built, not just born into. Choosing each other is just as real as blood, so they did, and they showed the papers to anyone who had a question. The townspeople were nothing but kind, offering congratulations and showing a deep respect for what they had done. The very same woman from the bride call, the one who had judged Mara before, walked up to them, looking a little shy. "I heard what you did," she said, her eyes on the children, "making it all official." "We sure did," Mara answered. "They are ours now, through and through. That is," the woman's voice caught in her throat. "That is just beautiful. You are all so lucky." "We are," Mara agreed, "but luck was just the start of it. The rest was a choice we make every single day." The woman nodded, a little bit of hope sparking in her eyes. "Maybe I can find that too." "You can," Mara said with certainty. "I believe you will." Driving home that evening with a wagon full of supplies and kids chattering away, Jonah reached out and took Mara's hand. "That was a good thing you told her," he said quietly. "It was the truth," Mara replied. "We are lucky, but we are also deliberate. That is what makes all the difference." "When did you get so full of wisdom?" Mara just laughed. "I have always been wise, Jonah. You are just now starting to pay attention. That summer was the finest of Jonah's life. The crops grew better than they could have imagined, and the homestead, which was once just a building, finally felt like a real home, buzzing with laughter and love." On a warm July evening, the whole family gathered outside to watch the sun go down. Sam was on Mara's lap, chewing on a little wooden toy, and Grace was leaning right up against Jonah. Emma and Daniel sat on the porch steps, talking low. "Pa," Daniel finally asked, "can I ask you something?" "You can always ask me anything. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life instead of being on your own like before?" Jonah took a moment to really think on that. Did he miss the quiet? The simple life with no one else to answer to? "No," he said, his voice full of conviction. "Not for a single second. This, having all of you, this is everything I never knew I was missing. I would not trade it for anything." "Not even on the tough days?" Emma chimed in. Jonah chuckled. "Not even then, because even the hardest days are better because y'all are in them." "I love you, Pa," Grace said, her small voice cutting through the evening quiet. Jonah felt a lump form in his throat. "I love you too, sweetheart, all of you. More than words can say." Mara looked over at him, and he saw his own feelings mirrored right there in her eyes. They had come a long way, the two of them. From an advertisement for a bride to this perfect moment, this family, this life. They had gone from being unwanted and alone to being chosen and treasured. Life out on the frontier was never easy, but they had stood together against every single challenge, and they had built something truly special. It was more than a homestead, it was a home. More than a household, it was a family. As the first stars started to dot the sky, Jonah pulled Mara closer and kissed her softly on the temple. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a risk on a man like me. For building all of this with me." "Thank you for choosing me," Mara whispered back. "For seeing something good in me." "I saw everything," Jonah told her. "I just did not know it at the time." They stood there together as the night grew darker and the children, one by one, drifted off to bed. When the last one was tucked in and the cabin was finally still, they looked out the window at the land they had made their own. "We did it," Mara said softly. "We really did." "We sure did," Jonah agreed, his arm holding her tight. "And we are going to keep on doing it every single day for the rest of our lives. That is a promise." "Promise," she answered. As they turned toward their own bed, Jonah knew, with a certainty that filled his soul, that the woman nobody else had wanted had given him everything that ever mattered. She gave him a family and a reason to get up in the morning. She showed him that life was meant to be shared, not just survived. And in return, he gave her the one thing she had never known, the deep, steady peace of being wanted, chosen, and loved, simply for who she was. The cowboy who took a chance on the unwanted bride discovered that she did not just change his life on the frontier, she changed his very soul. And that, he reckoned, made all the difference in the world. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.